planning guidelines for cabins and modular homes and even mobile homes. We're all well aware of the housing crisis, indeed you've been addressing it here, and we're all talking about it, but the situation where people have modular homes or have a mobile home, in this crisis, I've asked before for a moratorium for 10 years, but enforcement by local authorities of planning policy against these log cabins and temporary dwellings is just, at the moment, is very, very strong. I have at least a dozen cases in South Tipperary myself, where people have been toughed out, been brought to court, been prosecuted for putting up log cabins in their own site, mobile homes, maybe extended log cabins in their own site. I'm not saying for reckless planning, I'm saying they're carefully constructed. These are modular buildings now, are very safe and very comfortable. And will you amend the guidelines? It's your bailiwick. As I said, you could easily, the government can easily issue the government guidelines on rural planning, which we're waiting for, they haven't been changed for 20 years. And we're told now that the Green Party are insisting these won't happen. And while the guidelines stay the same as those outdated guidelines for rural planning, a house won't be built in rural Ireland for a farmer's son or daughter or anybody else either. And I think that's a shocking scenario, that the tail is wagging the dog to that extent. And I'm calling on you, Minister, to publish the new statutory rural planning guidelines and include log cabins within them. That's simple, stroke of a pen. And also for you, Minister, again, to sign an emergency ministerial order, a statutory instrument, relaxing the planning laws for log cabins and accept them as a viable solution to the housing crisis. I have a gentleman, Sean Meehan, 66 years of age, and he has given me permission to use his name here. There was a matter of separation, and he bought us 5 acres of land, and he's built a log cabin on it. He's been in court 4 times by Tipperary County Council, and he was told by the judge 10 days before Christmas to have his bag the next time to face. He's been sentenced to 4 months in prison if he doesn't remove this log cabin. He's nowhere to go. Tipperary County Council don't have anything to give him, and they haven't his application approved for housing, and he's in a desperate situation. Just imagine that, an Irish citizen, and all these people are buried within a mile of him up the road, born and reared in the townland of Loughkent, and in Woodinstown, and he has comfortable house there on his own site with his dog and his cats, and now he's facing prison, or facing sleeping under the main garden in Clonmel when he comes out of prison. So that's a bonkers situation. I'm not asking for planning laws to be recklessly abandoned. Have a moratorium at least, and you can do it. Because you won't publish the planning guidelines that long promised commitments in your manifestos for government, but the Green Party won't allow you to do it. But this man and many more like him, I have 12 others that have been prosecuted by the council. Now the council have enough to do to find homes for people, where people have the will and the way and the £2 together to do this. And I've been in many of them, lovely, comfortable homes, connected to their own sewers and their own water, not interfering with the aesthetic scenery or anything else, and being prosecuted. Could you believe it in this day and age? Being prosecuted. And Deputy McNamara said you can't prosecute people arriving here illegally. I mean, this is shameful treatment of Irish citizens, and in this case, Sean Meehan, and you sit idly by. You are the minister. You can, stroke of a pen, change the guidelines and introduce a statutory, instrument to make these people not be made criminals for trying to house themselves.
Minister. Firstly, Deputy, look, I believe in rural housing. Last year, actually, over 5,000 one-off homes were built in rural areas, so people do get planning permission for rural homes. We also believe in ensuring that our towns and villages are rejuvenated. That's why the vacancy grant in particular, we've had over 7,000 applications that where people can actually get vacant and derelict property, get up to €70,000, bring those homes back into use as well. Specifically in relation to demountable or log cabins, that type of property, people can seek and can apply for planning permission for those type of dwellings as well. I think you're not looking for. Just let me answer the question.
Please let the minister.
2.5 minutes left to respond to you. If you'd be quiet, I'll try and answer your question, and specifically around Tipperary. But so people can apply for planning permission for that type of dwelling. That's allowed. Now, sorry. Under what you have, you are also not looking for a blanket, sort of moratorium, because we have to have a planning system and planning rules in place, specifically in relation to Tipperary, because a number of cases have been brought to the Department's attention, and to look at existing dwellings that are in place. Tipperary have been asked to review the situation there, and a review is being carried out in that regard to see, are there ways that we can actually ensure that there's some type of standard around these type of properties. But every back garden in the country can't have a log cabin to live in. You can't just set aside planning law for that. But I am aware that there are people who've been living in these dwellings for a long number of years, where enforcement orders have been issued by local authorities. In many instances, they've been issued, Deputy McGrath, because complaints have been received by the planning authority from other residents in the area. So it's not as if, and I can assure you that Tipperary County Council have gone out looking for these dwellings. It's on the basis of complaints received in and enforcement taking place in that space. I have written to the Chief Executive recently of Tipperary County Council when some of these cases were brought to my attention to ask him and his team to review the situation. In relation to the rural planning guidelines as well, they're at a very stage of finality right now. Minister Kieran O'Donnell is dealing with that, and I expect them to be published very soon. And they're areas that can be looked at as part of that. Okay, so, you know, I think it's important to note that many of the enforcement orders that have been moved have been on the basis of complaints that have been received by planning authorities from other residents in those areas. It's not something that the local authority have actually gone out and sought to issue these orders with no complaints received at all.
Thank you, Minister. In this case, from Whitelands Cross, right up to Loughlin Cross, where where Dan Breen was married in a cow house there, and his wedding took place there in troubled times. Every resident on the road signed a petition supporting Sean Meehan to be allowed to live on his site in his home. So you're totally wrong there. And you promised in the last election, if you faulted, that the rural guidelines would be changed. But then you didn't go deal with the Greens, because that went out the window. The political promises have been broken, including a promise to change the guidelines. You're wrong also in saying that planning can be obtained for these. We have umpteen cases where they can't and won't, because the guidelines that you won't publish won't allow the planners. The planners might want to do it, they can't do it with current guidelines. You said now Kieran O'Donnell is going to do it. When will it be? After the Greens are out of government and long gone. You haven't the will to change. I mentioned to bring a man to court, a 66-year-old man, 4 times, and now he's also faced with, he's got 4 months in prison if he doesn't remove it. And if he doesn't remove it, the council will hire someone to remove it, and he'll have to pay for it. Just think about it. When we're trying to see tents all over the country, in towns and everywhere else, people trying to sleep in them, this man has housed himself. There's 12 more like him that I'm dealing with have housed themselves. They're looking for anything off the council. Be left alone. You do your job in government, but you're not doing it.
As planning minister, I'm not going to do that.
No
so I'm not referring specifically to that case. I've already answered in relation to instances, this issue that's been raised specifically in Tipperary, and I've engaged, my officials have engaged with the with Tipperary County Council. The rural planning guidelines will be published shortly. A lot of work has been undertaken in that regard. They haven't been updated since 2011. But Deputy, the facts are borne out as well that the last full year that we have in 2022, about 5,000 rural homes were built. There 5,000 plus permissions were granted. So to say the planning is not granted in rural areas is simply not true. It's not borne out by the facts.